Hey friends, happy Friday. I'm jumping back in today to continue my series this week of tips for feeling your best during marathon training. I have tip number 2 for you today. I hope you guys enjoyed tip number 3 yesterday about glute activation. I had some great comments and fun conversations with people about using that tip, and I'm excited for you guys to try it. So this week is a big training week for me. I am doing 20 miles in my quest to run the Chicago Marathon on October 7th. So wanted to provide some tips that have been helping me feel really good during marathon training and share them with you. Hope that you get a lot of benefit out of it, and maybe we even just have some conversation about things that have been helpful so we all feel really good while we're out there giving it our best shot. So so tip number 2 today, I have to say it was hard for me to pick how to categorize my tips 2, 3, and 4 because I think they're all really helpful and beneficial in very similar ways, but definitely all important ones. So this one is about your training plan, and I'm sure you realize that a training plan is really important when you're going to do a big race like a marathon. So for me, I'm training very differently this time than I have in the past, and it's made a huge difference. And so that's why I knew this one had to be in my top 4 of tips to feel your best during marathon training. So I've run dozens of half marathons, and I've completed 4 marathons. Chicago will be my 5th. So when I've run half marathons, I have typically felt pretty good. The mileage required for training for something like that is not super high, so I really haven't had injuries. I haven't had a lot of problems with completing the training for that and feeling pretty good and feeling like I got decent times. But when I made the switch over to training for marathons, I found that I would get really run down, be tired and sore and achy all the time, and just not necessarily feeling like I actually run as fast as I feel like I should be able to do, and getting little injuries. There's always going to be some kind of injury or ache and pain coming in. So it's always been my goal to figure out how do I train for a marathon without getting injured. And what a lot of that comes into is there's like an envelope of function that you can work within. So when you're working in your envelope of function, you are working at a rate of like what you are capable of, like muscular wise and mechanic wise, and what's required of you to complete the training and the race are in line with each other. So you're not getting injured and you're feeling good and you're pushing and you're feeling strong. When I would go into marathon training, I was starting to get out of my envelope of function, and it was definitely causing injury. So changing up the training plan is a really important way to increase your envelope of function so that you can push yourself and have those higher goals that you want to have, like running a marathon. So this training plan for me has definitely made a difference in how I feel, and I know that I'm going to be stronger. So like when I go into training for something, I'm thinking about a couple things. Like I want to feel really good. I don't want to be injured, and I want to be able to push myself. So that's like the one side. Like I feel like that's kind of a minimum. And then the other side is the performance side. So you have a goal. You want to push yourself to achieve. You want to keep getting better. And that's like the performance side. So I have yet to see, I guess, if the training will help me achieve the performance goal that I want to get. I think it will, but there's a ton of evidence that I've seen from other people who've trained like this, who have achieved high performance goals by changing it up. And one example of a person is my friend Toby in my running club, and he's like a big athlete. He does triathlons all year long. He has run tons and tons of races, and he's very thoughtful and methodical in his training and what he does, and he's really competitive. And he used to train more just like kind of based on doing long runs, making sure he got the distance in, but since he changed up his training plan to be more like the one I'm going to tell you about, the principles that you want to have in your optimal training plan, his performance has skyrocketed. And I was like blown away when he shared this, and it was just super motivating for me to hear. And he's not the only one who's had an improvement in his results from training like this. Countless other people in my running club have as well. But I wrote down what improvements he's had because it really astonished me, and I thought it'd be awesome to share it. So he had a huge improvement in just a year of changing up his training to include these principles that I'm going to tell you about for my tip number 2. So he ran the Irving Marathon in April of 2016, and his race pace was 9:20, and that was an overall time of 4 hours and 4 minutes, which is pretty good, actually. Not a bad time at all. But he started training like this, and 1 year later, he ran Mountains to Beach Marathon in May of 2017, and he was able to run a 7:10 race pace for a 3:08 finish time. That is like an hour of improvement, which is insane. Like, I cannot even imagine improving my marathon time by an hour. And he did it in a year by including these training principles that I'm going to tell you about. So, thinking about your training plan, when I've done training plans in the past, it's always been sort of miles based, and I knew my goal pace, what I wanted to achieve at the end of the race, and would sort of use that to guide my tempo runs and track workouts and long runs. And it is important to have a variety of types of runs that you're doing. However, what I wasn't doing correctly was that I was working at a really high rate for all of these runs, and it was breaking me down. And over the weeks, like, that's when the injuries started to creep in because I wasn't recovering well enough. I was pushing at too high a rate. So that's the mistake probably a lot of people have had, I'm imagining, in training. And it's something that I'm not doing anymore. And I think that's why I feel really great. So credit for the change of the training plan for me goes to the coach of our running club, Mark Miniciello. And he has given me this really awesome plan that uses, like, you've got a whole grid and everything to, I know you can't see that, but to map out, like, where's your goal pace and what should you be running in, and it uses zones. So I'm sure some of you have heard about using different zones for your running and training. But the main principles of a really good training plan to prevent injury and highlight your performance we'll be using these zones where you're going to be running, like, the majority of your runs are going to be at a slower rate. And in the aerobic zone, or like a zone 2, it's a lower intensity. So maybe 90% of your runs are going to be slower. For me, it amounts to, like, my midweek runs, my long runs, they're all almost a minute slower than my target race pace is going to be. So it feels slow, but like Coach Mark says, you have to run slow to run fast. So I'm trusting that, and it's feeling pretty good. The other smaller portion of your training is going to be at a higher intensity, maybe 1 day a week, to possibly 2, where you're running in intervals, like shorter bursts at a faster speed. And this could be mapped out by your training plan. But it's a higher intensity, and he calls it an anaerobic threshold. You can call it like a zone 4, where you're really pushing the intensity, and your pace is going to be 45 seconds to a minute faster than your target race pace. So it's a higher intensity than your race pace. When I'm running these, I try to think about, like, I'm trying to make race pace feel easy, like this is hard work. And I'm only doing that 1 day a week so that I'm preventing injury by still increasing my performance and my speed with that intensity, but I'm not overworking and causing injury over time. So those are some of the really main big principles to have in a training plan. 90% or so, majority of your runs are slower, lower intensity, aerobic zone. Less percentage of your workout is going to be in a higher intensity in the anaerobic threshold zone. Other really important things to include are strength training. So like the tip that I gave yesterday about the glute activation training, I do a strength training program 2 days a week, and I know that's made a huge difference. I hadn't done it in the past because I just didn't make myself do it, and now I am. That's really, really important, and also can include like different tempo runs. But the take home really is to adjust the intensity that you're working at to be a lower intensity most of the time, with at least 1 day a week of this higher intensity, so that you prevent injury, you enhance your performance like Toby and like I hope to do when I run the Chicago Marathon in a few weeks. And it feels really good. So if you've had some experience with training plans like this, or with the training plans like I've had in the past where it was more miles based and really pushing, I'd love to hear about your experiences. I know there's a ton of opinions out there about training and different ways of going about it, so I wanted to just keep this kind of broad overall. You can approach a running coach like my coach if you have more questions specifically for yourself. But I know it's made a huge difference for me, and I hope that you'll try something like that in your marathon training and it'll make a big difference for you. So I'm going to pop in one more time this week before my 20-mile run to give my number one tip of how to feel your best during marathon training. And it's number one for a reason. Like, it's hands down the best thing that's happened to me. So I'm going to share that with you guys this weekend before I run. And I hope you've enjoyed this tip and you find it helpful. You can share it with somebody if you think they'd benefit from changing up their training plan to prevent injury and enhance their performance, or have some comments below. I'm running this marathon for an awesome nonprofit called Girls on the Run, and they are training leaders of tomorrow through girls and running programs and empowerment, and it's a really awesome cause. So I'd love your support in this, and happy that you are here watching with me and giving me support that way. So I will join you guys again this weekend. Have a great night.